application has 145.
I'm gonna talk to the chair. I think the rules of procedure allow for.
Oh, I didn't bring mine.
Okay.
I think 145 is correct.
Okay, it's 145.
Good, thank you.
It's always something.
It's 1:45. The agenda
We
is
haven't
wrong.
changed the agenda.
When you announced this
And I don't
application,
know if anybody's here.
No, I usually bring one. How about a tissue too? You got a tissue in there? I forgot my kerchief.
Cindy's the only one that was on.
but my kids are grown.
So it's really 145?
1:45, yes.
Thank you.
Just be sure to make a change in the agenda.
Okay, so we have a little bit of
The
a.
note.
I mean, yeah, I can tell.
It's in the notes.
I don't think he does know.
Okay, I'll
Kim
tell
will
him.
fix it.
The last applications, I would suggest, and it's up to you, to impose a time limit. The rules of procedure say that the chair can impose any time limits that they want, as long as it's equal for both sides. And then up to 4 minutes for public comment. Here, there is gonna be a distinction between public comment and people who are affected party status. Affected party status can have more time or not, it's completely up to you. Some of them are represented by council, so it would just be one person, one set time limit. But I would suggest, based on the number of people, that we probably limit it to some semblance of time and everyone gets that amount
Per person, or not per
per
side?
person.
What do you suggest?
No, well, a staff is gonna have their whatever they get, applicant's gonna have whatever they get, and the affected party is gonna have, whatever their representative, they get a lot of time, so. I mean, we can do something, but if it's a public comment, it's a 4 minutes each, which is what your rules of procedure suggests.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Done.
And I can say that at the beginning of the, I'm gonna make a brief announcement before this one gets started anyways, because
Agreed.
there's 4 applications underneath one umbrella. So I'll make a little announcement before the,
Ready, set, go.
done.
This one.
145? Okay. Oh, so we can get into these folks first?
I mean, it's up to you.
We'll do it.
If anybody's interested in this or not, if they want to say anything, ask if there's any public here.
I don't think that's happening tonight.
Maybe, we'll
Agreed.
see.
Okay. Here we go.
I'm gonna observe.
So it's 7:03, and I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Board meeting of November 18th, 2019.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hasse, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Stavropoulos,
Here.
Mr. Vesey,
Here.
Ms. McCumber,
Here.
Ms. Vigil.
Here.
Item number 2, the approval of the minutes for the last meeting.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as written for the October 21st meeting.
One second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Our quasi-judicial announcement, please.
Yes. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning and Zoning Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board this evening wishing to disclose any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest? Seeing none. Anyone wishing to speak this evening, if you could please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
So sworn.
Item number 4 is application 19-63.
And Pat McNeese, Principal Planner. This is a request for site plan approval to construct a commercial building for specialty retail use, including parking and on-site wetlands preservation and mitigation on about 2 acres of land located at the southeast corner of North Pinellas Ave and Dixie Highway. This is a 12,750 square foot building that's proposed for specialty retail, which is really described as like a strip shopping center type development. The project does include wetlands preservation and mitigation area on site. With respect to your comprehensive plan, this is in the commercial general future land use category, and it's in an area that is generally office or commercial, both on the city future land use map and on the county future land use map. This area has a mix of properties that are in the incorporated area and some unincorporated. It's in the general, so the project we feel is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's in the general business zoning district, and that permits retail sales establishments by right. Again, there's that mix of zoning, county and city, of either office or commercial along the strip from the river north to the county line. The Technical Review Committee did review this application. The last review was on August 1st, 2019, and had no objections to the request. The facilities impacts are given on page 3, and this project is not expected to degrade levels of service. So staff recommends that this project meets the comprehensive planning and zoning requirements, and recommends approval of the site plan subject to 6 conditions listed on page 4 of the staff report. Are there any questions?
No questions?
Seeing no questions.
The applicant like to make a presentation?
Hello, Joe Simoneau with WRA Engineering, 4260 West Linebaugh Avenue, Tampa, Florida, 33624. I'm here to answer any additional questions you may have. We agree with staff's recommendations for approval. Thank you.
Any questions of the applicant?
I have one. I did notice that the applicant had declined to submit an elevation for the project. Could you give us just a general outline of what the purpose of the structure is?
Sure. I think that they're trying to keep their options open now. We have a clear list of approval conditions that they need to abide by, so anyone that comes to develop the parcel will have to adhere to those. But in order to define the exact architectural specifications of what it is at this point, I think is a little bit premature. But everything's been clearly laid out in the approval conditions to make sure everybody's expectations are met, yours and theirs.
Any questions of the applicant? Are there any public comments on this application?
No, I'm not gonna ask. It's okay.
Seeing none. Any discussion from the board?
No discussion? Would someone like to make a motion on the application?
Go I make a motion to approve application 19-63. Have a second?
And just for clarification, is that the motion to approve the application with the conditions as stated by staff?
That is correct.
I'll second that.
Do we have a roll call?
Ms. Vehil,
Yes.
Ms. McCumber,
Yes.
Mr. Vesey,
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos.
Yes.
Item number 5 is application 19-132.
And this is an application for a rezoning amendment for Red Bank Investments. And this property's in the special area plan, which is the transect zoning area of the city. And the applicant is requesting a change from designation of T5D, which is called the North Pinellas Ave transect, to the T4C transect, which is called residential high. And this property is about 1.46 acres in size. It's located on the north side of East Live Oak Street and just south of Athenian Way. So it's that parcel of vacant land there that's in front of the townhomes that are over there on Athenian Way. This is, again, in a special area plan. And the applicant is proposing to build a townhome development, and the current zoning would allow the residential density proposed by the applicant, but it doesn't permit the townhome product. It only permits apartments. So the applicant could develop the property with apartments by right today, but townhomes is what is desired. And this zoning change would result in an allowable density that would be higher in the T4C district than it is in the current T5D. In order to allow that, the countywide plan restricts raising the density in this special area plan, which they call an activity center. So in order to allow the change, the applicant has agreed to a restrictive covenant on the property that restricts him to the allowable density under the current zoning. And that's acceptable since really all he wants to do is change the type of housing he's going to be building. And he did submit a couple of ideas, renderings, both of which are under the current density cap. With respect to the comprehensive plan, this requested change is consistent with the comprehensive plan goals. The surrounding area is developed actually with townhome residential, with commercial, and with public park. There's the dog park and splash park are right next door. And this is a suitable infill development that meets the goals of the comprehensive plan and the community redevelopment district area that it's in. This project is in the Sponge Docks Character District of the Special Area Plan and will support that character district's intent to increase residential stability while being consistent with the housing types that are envisioned there. The existing townhomes to the north are also in that Sponge Docks district. The change from T5D to T4C really shifts the allowable use emphasis to residential. So that's the main result of the changes in use that are allowed. Again, apartments could be developed, but the applicant wants to do townhomes. And this corridor, the North Pinellas Commercial Mixed Corridor, really, if you look at the map in your packet of the zoning map, which is on page 10, you'll see that North Pinellas district extended over onto Live Oak. It was kind of originally envisioned that commercial mix would go over there. But the south side of the street has drainage major drainage infrastructure associated with Live Oak. And the north side, like I said, has townhomes. So really this fits a little bit better. The project is served by public facilities, and the site plan approval process will be required, so you will see this again. It will come back before you during site plan approval. And this amendment would not adversely impact or exceed the capacity of the city to provide services. The TRC reviewed this project on October 17, 2019, and recommended approval. And this rezoning was properly noticed, and there were no comments received. And staff is recommending approval of the zoning amendment from T5D Transect District to T4C Transect District. Are there any questions?
Will it be part of the same townhome development? I think it's Anclote Crossing.
Not that I know of. I don't, maybe the applicant can answer that if they're present.
Are they? Go ahead.
No, please.
I just wondered if they were present. Go ahead. Keep going.
It seems quite a mouthful there and kind of a complicated topic, but I just want to try and distill it, is that essentially, as I understand it, this application is going to allow the developer to build townhomes. Is that, at its essence, is the purpose of the application? It's not an increase in density because of the covenant that would be applied, but currently it would be approved for a certain density, could build apartments, but he really wants to build townhomes, but it's not allowed under this current zoning?
Correct.
Okay, so this would be, we're not going to add any more units, he just gets to build townhomes, which frankly is more consistent with what is already there.
Correct. That's correct.
Does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Hi, my name is Farhad Nick J. I'm one of the owners. We agree with the staff recommendation. I'm just here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of the applicant?
Do you know if it's going to be part of the same HOA that's in
Sorry, I can't hear
Anclote
you.
Crossing?
You can speak up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not quite close enough. Will this development or this new buildings be part of the Anclote Crossing development that's already in there? Will they?
We'll be under the same homeowners association, but and the same retention pond, but I guess a different phase of it, yes.
Okay. And I know that there's beautiful live oak trees in that lot, and so I would love to see when you do your site planning to try to keep as many of those as
I'm
possible.
sure that'll be coming up at the site plan review.
Any other questions of the applicant? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this application, either in support of or against? Seeing none, any board discussion?
Well, with no questions, would someone like to present a motion?
My turn. I make a motion to accept application 19-132 as written.
Make a second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Vehil?
Yes.
Ms. McCumber?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes. The next item on the agenda is item 6, which is application 19-145. Is there anyone here for application 19-145? Conversation to move that perhaps to the end, and then we can address, I think, what everyone is here for is the North Lakes. Does anyone have an issue with me moving it to the end of the meeting?
Nope, that's fine.
Okay, then we'll pick that up at the end. All right, moving forward, item number 7 is going to be the North Lakes Estates Pioneer Developers, which is application 18-51 and 18-52. Do I have that correct?
Actually, there are 4 applications for the North Lake Estates Pioneer Developers. Application 18-50, 19-32, 18-51, and 18-52. Some of these items are quasi-judicial in nature, some of them are legislative. Because the evidence will likely be in support of all 4 applications, we will do 1 presentation from staff, we will do 1 presentation from the applicant. We will have the affected parties that have been sworn or would like to be sworn in speak underneath their time limits, and then we will have a final presentation both from staff and the applicant, and then we will close the public hearing and move on to discussion. At that time, there will have to be 4 separate motions, one for each application, because there is separate criteria to consider for each one, and then we will go from there. And of course, I can direct anything as we go if needed.
Thank you, counsel. That being said, staff, would you like to begin?
All right, so I'll just give you a brief overview, and then I'll touch the highlights of each of the application with respect to the criteria. So this project, as we just heard, has basically 4 pieces. One is a request for voluntary annexation into the city. The second is a development agreement proposed. The third is a land use amendment, a future land use map amendment to the city's comprehensive plan. And the fourth is a plan development, a preliminary plan development, which is also accompanied by a rezoning. So those items go together. And what this is a proposed 44-unit, single-family residential project of 1/3 to 1/2 acre lots. And it's configured to have, it's got wetland area, proposed wetland preservation and created wetlands and stormwater area on the north edge of the project. So that is a revised configuration from the original submittal that the applicant gave us. There's one entrance proposed from East Lake Drive, and the site layout is all internally oriented to the project, so there aren't any perimeter roads or anything abutting other properties. This is served by a combination of city and county services with respective facilities, and we can get into those details as well. This area is characterized by basically low-density tract or large lot properties and planned developments in this area. The city comprehensive plan, future land use map category proposed is residential very low. The county-wide map that you all are familiar with, that already has a designation of residential very low. So RVL, residential very low, is the lowest available density land use category that the city has, and this project is consistent with that category and with the character of the surrounding area. The plan development, by the way, and the development agreement would hold the applicant to the proposed layout of the project. So that's another item you should be aware of. TRC reviewed this application, the applications, the annexation, land use change, and plan development in May 2018, after which, as I mentioned, the applicant reconfigured the project a bit, and they reviewed the development agreement in May of 2019. So with respect to the annexation, just a couple other points of information. Again, the Pinellas County current land use designation is rural residential and preservation. The proposed city designations are residential very low and preservation. The Pinellas County zonings are residential plan development and residential agriculture. The request is to take the entire property to residential plan development under the city's zonings. The annexation has been determined to be contiguous to existing municipal area, will not create an enclave. Page 3 of the annexation staff report lists the public facility services and where those are coming from. With respect to item 3 on page 3, the county has been notified of the proposed annexation, and we have not received a response from the county. With respect to item 3B, the owner has voluntarily agreed to comply with the city's comprehensive plan. And with respect to item 3C on page 4, again, the residential very low density is higher than the county's rural residential density. That is the Pinellas County, distinct from the county-wide map. I know it's always fun to deal with 2 or 3 layers here that we have, but Pinellas County rural residential allows a ½ unit per acre, whereas the RVL on the city and county-wide maps allow 1 unit per acre. That's what necessitates the land use amendment. TRC reviewed this again in May of 2018, and the status of the comments are provided in the staff report. And this was properly noticed. I do have, and I will go ahead and hand out additional public comments that came in since the staff reports were prepared. With respect, so that completes the annexation. Staff is recommending approval of the annexation and that it meets the criteria, your review criteria. With respect to the development agreement, some of the highlights there, the applicant is proposing a duration for the development agreement of 10 years or the last issuance of the last certificate of occupancy for the last residence to be built. Again, the development is a single-family detached dwelling development. Page 3 lists some of the highlights of what's included in the development. Again, the public facilities are listed as well. There's no reservation or dedication of land proposed. Page 4 lists some of the development approvals that will be required. That is not all inclusive, but that lists some of the major ones. And yes, this will require amendment to the city's future land use map and the zoning map, as we just discussed. And the agreement is conditioned on those being approved. The development agreement does require completion of all permitting, review, and processes under number 8, and I've listed where you can find that in the agreement. The statement addressing failure of the agreement to address anything is included, and the location's given there. There is no phasing proposed for this project, and the development agreement was properly publicly noticed. Again, we received some comments basically about the project, so I just grouped those all into one packet, which I'll hand out. The second public hearing on this development agreement is set for the Board of Commissioners meeting of December 3rd, starting at 6:30 in these chambers. Staff's recommending approval of the development agreement between Pioneer Developers and the City of Tarpon Springs. And I will hit a few highlights of the preliminary plan development staff report as well. Again, this is an amendment on the future land use map from rural residential and preservation under the county to residential very low and preservation under the city. And the rezoning from RPD, residential plan development, and residential agriculture to residential plan development. And there might be a couple of new things you haven't heard. Again, with respect to the comprehensive plan consistency, just to expand on that a bit, the RVL category in both the city and countywide plans is characterizes this designation as a transition for between more developed and less developed areas for rural or large lot, very low density residential. And this proposal is consistent with those uses that are already have those characteristics in the area. It has the non-intensive qualities and the layout that protects natural resources that is called for in the countywide plan. Again, the area is occupied by land tracts that are developed with single-family homes and also with residential plan developments that are, again, located in unincorporated county. This plan development is 1/3 acre to 1/2 acre lots clustered to create the area for the preserve and mitigation wetlands and for stormwater handling. The only primary allowable use under RVL will be residential. So the use of agriculture as a primary use will go away with that land use change. The density, as we mentioned, goes to 1 unit per acre. Floor area and impervious area ratios will not change with this. And the preservation area boundary upon approval of this application, should it be approved, will be revised to coincide with the wetland and stormwater handling area. There are several comprehensive plan policies listed there. Just to point out that the use of the plan development mechanism that's provided in our code is recommended for an area like this, so that there is flexibility to cluster the lots and provide a layout that works in an area like this. The applicant did submit, so the applicant did do that while retaining the large lot character. There is an environmental considerations report that's included with the applicant's submittal. It's in your packet, and it recommends some appropriate actions and measures to be taken to enhance the existing habitat and protect listed species. And trying to see if there's anything else new here. The project, and just going through your rezoning criteria, staff feels that all these criteria are met. And with respect to item 2, the only thing new would be that this is compatible with the surrounding low density and does not introduce incompatible uses, noxious uses, any of that sort of introduction of new impacts to the area. Public facilities, again, are being handled with respect to water, solid waste, wastewater handling, drainage, transportation, and other services that the city will provide, such as solid waste disposal, law enforcement, those types of things. And again, the TRC reviewed this. This is the same in this staff report the same TRC list that's in the other ones. All the items are included because they reviewed everything together. So this was properly publicly noticed, and again, I will go ahead and hand out the public comments here in a second. And staff is recommending approval of the future land use change from Pinellas County Rural Residential and Preservation to City of Tarpon Springs Residential Very Low and Preservation, and a rezoning from Pinellas County Residential Plan Development and Residential Agriculture to City of Tarpon Springs Residential Plan Development. And we have 7 conditions. I can read those into the record if you'd like, but those are on page 11 of the staff report.
Any questions of staff?
I have a question. Why is it necessary for there to be an annexation for the developer to develop this? Is there a reason that they can't do it under county guidelines?
The proposal, as presented, is a development at the rate of 1 dwelling unit per acre. The current county zoning doesn't, the current county land use, doesn't allow the 1 unit per acre. The county density is a half a unit per acre.
So if I understand that, the only way that, if I understand that, in order for them to move forward with this, they have to join the city via the voluntary annexation, otherwise the plan doesn't work for the county.
Correct.
Since there was, it's the issue that maybe they thought that there was a different, what is the current county per acre? Is it a half a unit per acre?
Yes.
So that would mean, in essence, that it would be a
1
2-acre
unit per-
parcels.
Right.
That's what the county allows.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are, if I heard this correctly, approximately 1/3 an acre to residents. That's what's being proposed here.
The density is 1 unit per acre. The lot sizes are 1/3 to 1/2 acres in size. So the density is calculated based on the entire piece of property, which is 43.5 acres. So that rounds up to 44 by our code. But the layout and the size of the lots do not have to comply with a minimum 1 acre lot size. That's what the plan development process lets you do, is lay out a development with clustered lots and lot sizes that are appropriate to the area while doing things like leaving open space, wetlands, and those types of things. So does that answer your question? So the lot sizes are less than an acre.
Even if it looked like it didn't, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
It just seems to me that it's a fairly big parcel for the city to annex, so I want to understand the details.
And keep in mind, this is a voluntary annexation, not an involuntary annexation. I don't know that that was delineated within the staff presentation.
It was. I have another question, but
No?
does anyone else have another question before I kind of a question, huh? Would this be one of the, if this were to be approved and to be annexed, I know that there was, before my time, a recent annexation within the last few years in this general area also. Is there contiguous property, City of Tarpon Springs? Is this contiguous? Because I did note that there was a mention of not being an island or such.
Yes, the property to the west was annexed in 2017, and this is adjacent to that, so that is one of your criteria, and this will not be an island or an enclave because of that.
That was the term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? the applicant presentation?
Yes.
Applicant like to make the presentation? Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members. My name's Katie Cole with the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson, representing the owner and the applicant of these 4 applications that are before you today. First of all, thank you to Ms. McNeese and her team and the city staff. As you can see, this application was submitted some time ago, and it's taken some time to get through the process based on a variety of reasons, and so we appreciate the patience of the staff. But as Ms. McNeese stated, there are 4 applications before you. The first is a voluntary annex application, and this is a rather perfunctory application. A property owner, so long as they meet the criteria in the statute, Florida statutes, which are replicated in the City of Tarpon Springs Code, has the right to annex into the city. And once that property is annexed into the city has the obligation to place a land use and zoning category on that property. So hence the reason that Ms. McNeese stated that the second application is for a land use category. Similar in 2017 when the McAlpin property was annexed into the City of Tarpon Springs. The residential very low category is the least intense category available density-wise to the City of Tarpon Springs property owners. It is the least intense category. And so the applicant and property owner, respectful of the countywide rules, which already carries an RVL category, did not seek to modify that. They simply wanted to come in similarly situated to the situation today. The situation today in the county is residential rural. That category does not exist in the City of Tarpon Springs. There is no half unit an acre category available. The least intense is 1 unit an acre, residential very low, which is why the land use being applied to this property upon annexation would be residential very low. The third application before you is the appropriate zoning. And the applicant has requested a residential plan development designation on this property. The residential plan development allows for the clustering of the parcels and property, very similar to Cypress Run adjacent to this property. It is also a clustered development. It's a half unit an acre, but has lot sizes of significantly less than 2 acres, despite the fact that the underlying land use is a half unit an acre. The fourth application before you is a recommendation of approval for the development agreement to memorialize all of this. And the applicant thought it was important to work with the city on a development agreement because while the RPD zoning category gives the staff and the commission a significant opportunity to negotiate specific criteria, the development agreement opens that door and allows the city further negotiations and to really ensure that certain criteria are met. Included in the development agreement, you will find a higher stormwater standard than what exists in the code, a high-quality development as described in the agreement, increased preservation land use from 6.5 acres in the county to 14.7 acres upon the annexation and land use designation in the city, and to provide wetland enhancements and creations in exchange for moderate impacts. Each of these things are articulated in the agreement. There's obviously a lot of people here tonight, and over the past year and a half, we've heard a lot of communication to the city with respect to this parcel. Similar to when the residents of unincorporated Pinellas County appeared before the commission to object to the McAlpin annexation as well. The Eastlake community of unincorporated Pinellas is mobilized to object to forced annexations, and that's not what this is. This is a voluntary annexation which meets each of the criteria in the code. None of the restrictions that limit a property owner from exercising his constitutional rights to annex his property into a municipality, so long as that contiguity and no enclave provisions are met, would limit this annexation, which is why we're here tonight. The staff report and your professional staff has already opined as to the suitability of this annexation. With respect to the future land use, currently the county designation is rural, and again, the city does not have that residential rural designation. Instead, the least intense designation is residential very low, and that is what is being requested today. Every other parcel in the near vicinity, with the exception of more intensely developed parcels, including those of the immediate neighbors and those of Cypress Run, have this same residential very low countywide designation. With respect to the rezoning, the proposed rezoning is for the RPD to incorporate the need to preserve the wetlands area and provide stormwater while still provide the suitability of developing this parcel to the development potential of the 1 unit an acre. The opponents here, we understand, are concerned about a few things specifically. The density of 1 unit per acre. Again, this is the least dense category in the city of Tarpon Springs. The stormwater. The engineer, Joe Semino with WRA, is here and can discuss that in more detail as needed. Any environmental impacts, Matt Miller, who's our environmental specialist, is here. But it's important to note that Southwest Florida Water Management District has already reviewed both the jurisdictional line, the proposed impacts, and proposed mitigation plan, and issued a conceptual ERP on each. And the traffic impact. A traffic analysis shows a nominal impact on East Lake Drive. Specifically, less than 4% of existing traffic would be the traffic increase. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Joe Semino and Matt Miller, who can answer any questions specific. I think probably our time would be better used to respond specifically to your questions or respond to some of the objectors' comments if they're here, and we can make this more productive, or we can offer some specific details about stormwater and environmental. I'll frankly leave that up to you all. Would you like to proceed with questions or further presentation? I think perhaps maybe some pointed questions, and that may further some more
We
pointed
can
discussion.
proceed with more presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Joe? I'll first ask Mr. Semino to recap his resume and proffer him as an expert witness.
Hello, Joe Semino, WRA Engineering, 4260 West Linebaugh Avenue, 33624, Tampa, Florida. I have been a professional engineer since 2007. I'm the vice president of WRA, which stands for Water Resource Associates. We've permitted well over 100 ERP permits through the Southwest Florida Water Management District, which is where we're permitting stormwater attenuation and water quality treatment. So basically stormwater management systems, development in floodplain, development associated with wetland impacts, which Matt can elaborate on later. We've permitted multiple projects stormwater-wise in the city of Tarpon Springs as well as Pinellas County, which is which would likely be looking at any drainage going north from our property across North Highlands Avenue. And I'd be happy to. And we've done a preliminary analysis of this site, and we're definitely here to hear residents' concerns. Again, something very, very important to consider. We have got a long way to go on the stormwater permitting. This is planning level, entitlement level, I guess, for lack of a better term. After this stage, we then go into construction plan design, stormwater management plan design. We have to go through a rigorous review through the Southwest Florida Water Management District and their stormwater engineers. We have to go through a rigorous review with City of Tarpon Springs drainage engineers as well. And again, Pinellas County, which is one of the rigorous around, will likely have to coordinate with them on any drainage going north. So this is by no means an approval of a drainage system, but I do believe with some pointed questions, I'd be able to give some pointed answers on what we've looked at so far, and would love to hear some of the neighbors' input.
Joe, can you speak directly as to the general flow of the stormwater and how, on a high level, based on the narrative that you discussed with staff, the stormwater will function on site,
Sure.
especially with respect to East Lake Drive?
Sure. In these planning stages, the critical things we look at is what water's coming at us, and what water is going away from us. The key component there is any water coming at us, we don't want to dam up, we don't want to block. We want to make sure that flows through our site, and anything falling on our site gets captured in our stormwater ponds, and then we send it off on its way to where it's going naturally. And it's critical that we make sure that we don't increase discharge rates going north. We have to look at any pinch points going north, which is always good to hear from the residents. Any pinch points going north where water may be blocked as well. So we look at what's coming at us, what's going away from us. There's probably about 20 acres coming from the Cypress Run Golf Club. It's going actually directly towards where our eastern property boundary is. So it was critical that we leave a lot of those wetlands along the eastern property line to accept that drainage. There'll be a very critical cross-drain culvert under our entrance road to make sure anything coming from the south can continue north. Obviously, we have a dozen residents around us, directly around us, connected to the property we need to be concerned about. In the southeast corner, it's going to be critical we manage that water coming in from the southeast corner, specifically for that home. To our southwest, we have 5 lots, at least 5 lots, if not 6, on George Street North, where we have about 14 acres trying to make its way through our property currently. So again, typically in the planning stage, it shouldn't be this way, but a lot of times engineers will put blinders on and look just at your site, come up with 10 to 15% pond and say, we'll see a construction plan review, it should work out. Here we've looked all around us, and again, to our southwest, we have about 14 acres trying to make its way through our project now, going to a wetland in the center of the property, which we'll get to in a moment. It's going to be critical that we, post-development conditions, quantify that remaining flow trying to get through us and provide accurate or adequate cross drainage to get that through our site and continue on its way to the north. Taking center stage in this site is a very critical wetland system. To the property owners, it's right on your southern property line. So this is what all the agencies are going to be looking very, very carefully at. We're going to have to demonstrate that we are not raising stages at all in the 25 or 100-year storm event in that wetland. From that wetland, it moves off to the northeast and merges with that flow from Cypress Run Golf Club before making its way through two sets of culverts under North Highlands Avenue into the tributary leading to the Anklet River. So we've got a place for the water to go. And southeast corner, critical. We have that homeowner, which is I'm sure is here, I hope is here. We need to make sure we're not blocking any water there. Southwest corner, we've got 5 or 6 homes there. We have to make sure continue through our project site and into that central wetland area. And that central wetland area, we have to show 7 different ways water levels are not going up in 25 or 100-year storms, and that we still have adequate discharge from it to the northeast, out and away from the site. So again, from a planning level, normally we're not that focused with everything around us, but we knew how important it was with this specific project.
With that, we're happy to answer any questions, or after the rest of the hearing, we can respond at rebuttal.
Any questions at this time? I have one. I'm familiar with the location and the road. It recently has suffered tremendous flooding to the west. Now, it's not adjacent to your property, but as one moves up Highland, frankly, it's been underwater for most of the year, and it's been pumped out. And I know it's not directly in front of the proposed project, but it's near. Obviously, there's some challenges there. Are you, A, aware of that? That would be the one question. And B, how can you show that that situation won't be created by your development on Highland Road?
You're speaking about the Highland flooding?
Yes.
Yes, we are aware of that, and I'll let Joe speak specifically, but as a general rule, as a matter of law,
our stormwater can't go on anybody else's property. So the situation is what it is on Highland, but certainly if we're the first ones developing new projects in this area, the regulatory and permitting agencies will look to this project to confirm and ensure that this project is not making the situation worse. And I'll let Joe to respond more specifically as to, I think he just described the culvert system and our wetland system, but I think he can speak more.
And if you're not aware of what I'm referring to, then, but if you are, can you elaborate and assuage us in any way that?
Sure. I'm aware that there's flooding on North Highland Avenue. Is in terms of the specific location of it, I would love to know exactly where, how bad, why. You know, again, we have two sets of culverts. Usually in these cases, we're looking for the one tiny culvert that water leaves our site. We have two sets of culverts under North Highland Avenue. It will be our job to make sure those are functioning properly before we assume they're functioning properly. If there's flooding directly north and east of us associated with these culverts, I need to know, because I need to make sure that if I'm assuming they're open, that they are open, and if they're not, we talk to Pinellas County and whoever needs to be talked to about cleaning those out. If it's flooding west of us, our water does not go north and west, but I'd be happy to look at it. It all gets accounted for in our drainage analysis.
I think you've answered the question. It is west by about 200 to 300 yards, but it's,
Yeah, we're more of a north and east flow, so we shouldn't be contributing to that at all.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant from the board?
No, just answered my question.
Yep.
Then we should continue.
Yep, and then the next presentation would be from anyone who is an affected party that would wish to speak either for or against this application. If you could please come, state your name. You will be given 4 minutes. And if you have not already been sworn in, I do need to swear you in. I'm sorry, I do not recall if I had the opportunity to swear you in. Have you been previously sworn?
Yes.
Okay. And just state your name and your address for the record.
My name is David Nelson. I live at 1132 East Lake Drive, Tarpon Springs, just to the north of this property.
And just one moment. Kim, are you timing? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I live just north of this property. And we talk about flooding, I had things I hadn't thought about before I came here tonight, but when we have the high tides and the rains, my backyard is flooded, big time flooding. Holland Creek that goes all the way through Cypress Run Golf Course, comes down, goes underneath East Lake Drive, and out into the Gulf. And when we have a high tide, there's no place for the water to go. So I've had several feet of water in my backyard several times on a storm event. I don't know where their water's gonna go. These guys have that kind of problem. But what I started to think about when I came here is, I came to one of these meetings a few months back, and this board, somebody complained about all the traffic that was gonna go on Alderton 19 at Mears Boulevard. And the excuse was, that was the board before us. So we're adding a whole lot of traffic, and this 4% number, I don't know where the hell that came from, but 4% traffic. You're gonna add 45 houses, and you're gonna add, I don't know, 300-400 vehicles a day up and down that road. I mean, I've lived here for almost 30 years, and there's just not that much traffic on East Lake Drive. So we're making a mess out of it, in my opinion. The county has a zone for 22 acres. I've met with both Mr. Mears and Mr. Zutz and said, we don't have a problem building 22 houses there. One of your original statements. Why not? That meets the county specs. They want to double that density, pack them in there, and I don't know what the last plan said, but they wanted to add mother-in-law houses on it before. So even make it more dense. So they're really shoving a lot of stuff in there. You bring up Cypress Run. I look at Cypress Run, there's a golf course through it and everything else, and it's open. Most of us that live up there have acreage, you know, and we've enjoyed that acreage for many, many years. The north side of Highland Avenue, or the north side of Keystone Road, has been a pretty rural area. You haven't had that density you've had in other places. And I hope you really consider, before you let them build 45 houses or 90 with a mother-in-law house in there, to build that. The thing I heard today is apparently there's not enough city sewer there to handle it, so they're gonna have to put in septic tanks for every one of these houses. I find that a little bit odd these times. And being in a construction industry, I didn't know we did septic tanks anymore. When you, well, you've already talked about it. When you take out the area of the 45 acres, take out the roads and the ponds and everything else, it does make these lots pretty dang small to put nice houses like they talk about they want to put on here. When I met with them, they were talking houses in the $750,000 range. But I don't know, when you start squeezing them into these little lots, I don't think you're going to sell houses for $700,000. They've asked for sidewalks on one side of the street in the subdivision instead of both sides. But why not, if you're going to allow them to do that, why don't we put sidewalks all the way down Highland Avenue and down East Lake Drive over to Keystone to hit the trail? We're going to add that many more people and stick them on the road. And I'm concerned now about walkers running around there. Somebody's going to hit or somebody's getting hurt and they're walking down the middle of the street because there's no sidewalks there now. And you add that much more traffic, why don't we put a traffic light on the corner of East Lake Drive? Probably let us in and out. You got one way in and one way out. I know there's subdivisions do that, but then I get thinking about what happens if there's a fire, or what happens to emergency vehicles, or what happens if you get in and out there. Some of the developments I've done, being in the site work business, we've always had an access where fire trucks could come in on a back way or back through them. You know, put stone pavers from down there. The plans I saw don't show this anywhere. I vote against it, and like I said, 22 houses I think would be fine. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Unfortunately, we're going to have a time limit on the speakers, and we very much appreciate your input. Do we have someone else that want to speak also? Okay.
Thank you.
If you could just wrap it up and.
I'll just turn it over to Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Mark Washburn, 124 East Lake Drive. I've only lived there 25 years, and that makes me actually a fairly new resident on the street. I'm on 2 acres, which is also one of the smallest lots on the road. And this whole development is completely incompatible with the surrounding area. And there's for a couple of reasons. One, the density obviously is much, much larger. The second thing, on the water side, just really quick, I want to mention, there's some deep flooding on the western side of Highland Ave. But my 2 kids used to go to Brook Creek Elementary. The school bus pickup and drop-off was at the corner of East Lake Drive and North Highland at the parish's farm. And they had to move it because that used to get 1 to 2 to 3 inches of water during the summertime. And my kids used to have to stay in the standing water on that end, and that's exactly where that development is going. So there's absolutely flooding there as well. And talking about that, one of the concerns I thought about is 44 McMansions. At the price range they're talking, there's going to be 4 to 6 full-size bathrooms in these homes, and I thought they had eliminated the accessory buildings they're talking about, and I just looked at the plan and they're still in there. So not only would there be these giant McMansions, but possibly behind them or next to them a in-law dwelling with another bathroom or 2. And you're going to have 6 to 8 bathrooms all going into septic. On the north side of the property, that's of course feeding right into the Anclote River, where we already have water quality issues. And the south side of the property is part of the Lake Tarpon, the namesake of the city's watershed district. And the south side of the property feeds, because it travels south, it's at a 20 to 30 foot elevation into the lake. So that means about half of these septic tanks are going to dump all that waste right into the Lake Tarpon. I'm not sure. Lake Tarpon is about a football field and a half away from the south end of the property. I don't think that's smart. 21 homes? Yeah, maybe, if you space them out nicely. But 44 homes, 44 septic tanks, and leach fields, drainage fields, that doesn't work. Regarding the traffic, 4% is ridiculous. By putting 44 homes there, and let's talk about the Cypress Run people. Most of them use the other entrance. And the point is there's only about 30 to 40 homes on our street as it is. This amount of homes will double the amount of homes on our street. Double the traffic, double the homes. DOT multiplies. It used to be 9 road trips per home, and I believe they upped it last year to 10. So that's 10 car trips per home times 44. That's a lot of cars to dump onto Keystone Road, which is already, rated a D or close to an F. The last thing I think is fairly important, and this is the conflict between neighbor and neighbor, okay? I have a warehouse. I work till 2 or 3 in the morning almost every night on bandsaw and power tools. I know there's dog kennels. There's a farm with poultry, pork, pigs. I know there's a lot of other people in our area that run warehouses that work 24/7. I hear an anvil going across the street from me 24/7. There's some, a Schmidt who's doing anvil work. How are those people in these McMansions going to be able to deal with these farms and agriculturals and dog kennels and horses that are surrounding them? There's going to be conflict like you wouldn't believe. And who's going to be responsible? They're going to be calling the Tarpon Springs code enforcement that can't do anything about us because I don't have a limit on how many chickens or roosters I want. If I want to have 10 roosters and 100 chickens, I'm allowed to. You guys can have 4 chickens and no roosters if you apply for the permit. So I really hope you deny this because it is not compatible with the surrounding area whatsoever. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Charlie Smith. I live at 2000 North Highland. We ended up by purchasing 10 acres of the McAlpin property that is directly west of the proposed subdivision. And I just want to make opposition to the current proposed subdivision of 44 homes per 43 acres. Neither my wife, Renee Smith, or myself would approve that. We're not against having a subdivision there. That's their property. They can put it. But putting 44 houses is too much. The big issue, one of the issues is the drainage. What they spoke about earlier is west of Riverside Ridge Road. It was flooded over half of the year this year, and you couldn't drive through it. If the same thing happens to the other end of North Highland, then what do we do? And also with the environmental consideration as far as the animals and everything, reading over their report, they mentioned nothing about the sandhill cranes, which is a federally protected species and also a Florida threatened species. It's not mentioned at all in the report, and they were only out there in the month of January. What about the other 11 months of the year, looking in county wildlife or whatever? And then with the additional 44 families, you're looking at traffic issues. We already have an issue of people racing up and down North Highland, threatening with the cars. As far as I know, there hasn't been a wreck, but that's just a matter of time. People racing up and down it. Last month, I went to the Tarpon Springs Police Department, and they told me it wasn't their jurisdiction. And the only thing that Pinellas County has done is put out a portable speed traffic trailer that sat there for a little over a week. And that's about the only issue of as far as anything that's been done with that. So, I mean, if it's not Tarpon Springs Police Department's jurisdiction or their problem, why are we giving them the money with our tax dollars and everything? And if they annex this other property in, you're adding the additional traffic up and down that North Highland and also with Keystone and all of that area. So in closing, I want to thank the opportunity that we've had to express our opinions. And like I said earlier, that my wife and myself, we both oppose the current proposed 44 houses. Thanks.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live in Cypress Run. My name is Dan Lawrence. I live on 1 1/4 acres there. I bought the property because there is no, regardless of what this young lady's saying about this density, I've never heard of 1/3 of an acre in our neighborhood or anywhere near our neighborhood where you could build a house. And so that just blew me away when she said that is compatible. It is not compatible with our area. The farmers and the people that are talking, good grief, they're rural people. They're not city people who are going to live in these McMansions. And the gentleman that said there's going to be some conflict, boy, you just don't know. I mean, we got coyotes, we got geese, we got everything in the world making noise. If you know, the wild animals making noise, that's one thing, but you put 44 families with whatever else they put in there, then you've got some real problems. So, and the 4%, do you just take these things out of a hat and say, oh, 4% looks good? Well, 4% is, you add 44 homes there, my kids catch a bus and I'm not kidding you, I have kids, even at my age, they catch a bus right there at the corner of Cypress Run, and there are nowhere near more than 4%, that'd be 96% of the traffic. It would add at least half, 50% more traffic. Now, that's my analysis. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Mueller. I'm the founder of the Council of North County Neighborhoods that represents about 25,000 residents in the unincorporated area of Pinellas County. The 9-member board of the Council of North County Neighborhoods overwhelmingly, unanimously voted against the annexation and development of this property as proposed. In 2012, the council had state legislation passed preventing involuntary annexations. We know this one is a voluntary, so we won't address that. But we are strongly opposed to the development of that 43.5 acres as they propose it. And some people prior to me spoke about the 21 or 22 homes. Probably you wouldn't have the opposition you have here today. In 2012, the council also developed what they call an overlay for the East Lake Tarpon Fire District boundaries of Pinellas County. It was approved, and it's part of the comprehensive plan. I would like to provide the board for consideration a copy of that, because many of the issues that are controlled by that plan are being violated by the development as proposed. I could cover a lot of the issues, but they're very specifically covered on quality of life issues that this community will affect beyond density and all the other flooding issues. They're all covered in the overlay, and I would like you, please look at this before you make your vote. Thank you very much.
Yep. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So sworn.
My name is Chris Pennick, or Christopher Pennick, and my wife is Lark Robert. We are probably the newest building residents on this area. I'm on 366 North Highland Avenue in Tarpon Springs. What I think all of this is kind of is missing the point is, how do I say this? We chose to move here from Jacksonville Beach, a lot more density issues than you do have down here, to relocate here because of the ruralness of the city. Because you allow it to have the wide open spaces. I have 2.75 acres, and I'm 20 minutes away from 2 major shopping centers. By adding this development, you're taking away what is one of probably the greatest jewels that this city has. So that's my issue, the first part. Sir, you asked a question about why they don't want to annex to this county, because the county has stronger rules. It took me 3 years to build my home in unincorporated Pinellas County than it did if I would have been with the Tarpon Springs. They had so many additional rules and regulations over wetlands and land use and everything, much more intense than you do have here. I'd also like to address the fact of the traffic at the corner of North Highland. It floods, and I mean it floods. My Escalade gets buried under there. That is the issue the county has been working to fix. They've stopped working on that because of this proposal. Because the traffic, what I heard today, the traffic that will be generated will be more than what their fix can handle. Septic systems. My house is, under roof 8,000 square feet. I have a huge septic system, more than, and even when it was smaller in the initial design phase, it would not fit on those proposed lots. So I've questioned that. What about if it does flood and this isn't fixed by the county? Are they proposing to fix the back way to get in there? Because if you can't get down East Lake, because there's an issue on the road, there's an accident or something happens, they can't pass. How are they going to get there? They can't, and if Tarpon Springs is flooded or North Highland is flooded, there's no other access point that's there. Pedestrians, it's a great place to walk, but you cannot get 2 cars and a pedestrian down those roads, any one of them. If you have a large car or a large truck like most of the homeowners do around here, you're not going to get through. What is the developer planning to do to make those roads safer? Because they're adding more traffic. The county plan is that way for a reason, because it wants to provide the preservation of the open space, of the wildlife, of the rural feeling. If I wanted to be on top of a community of houses right next to me, I would have bought in Trinity, you know? You talk about the open spaces involved with Cypress Run, and it's a low density. It's also got a huge golf course attached to it. So you see deer running back and forth of it. You see animals playing. You don't get that. I drive home in my driveway, and I had 3 deer the other night laying in my front yard, just laying there. I didn't want to drive any further because I didn't want to disturb them. You're going to lose that when you add this many houses, this much traffic. I'm all for development. My father-in-law was one of the founders of Nocatee. I get it, but I also know what it does to your environment around you. It destroys it. And you've got all these people, I'm probably one of the youngest persons that's here, and this is what my generation wants. We want to be able to have our cake and eat it too. I mean, we want to be able to work and shop, but give our children the chance to grow up in wildlife, because you can't find that hardly anywhere in the state of Florida. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Hickman. I live at 1049, Royal Birkdale Drive in Cypress Run. The residents of Cypress Run are concerned with this new development in not keeping with the low-density development of our community and other East Lake neighborhoods. I am appealing to the city of Tarpon Springs and to the property owners to consider that the proposed intense density will negatively affect the preservation areas, the wildlife, and the traffic in this area. I was on the board of CNN, the Council of North County Neighborhood, and followed the founding director, Mr. Mioli. And at that time, we spent many months with North County Neighborhoods, the Pinellas County Commission and their staff, and our state legislatures in putting in place the East Lake Overlay. This document provides density and quality of life guidance for all new developments in the East Lake and North Lake area of Pinellas. Incidentally, the overlay boundaries as defined by the East Lake Fire District's map, which includes this property, so it does lay within it. We're not wanting to keep an owner from developing his property, but rather to keep it congruent and with the surrounding properties and existing density that would allow the protection of the preservation areas and the existing wildlife that we have there, and there is a lot around there, and lower traffic demands on our neighborhood connector roads. I talked with the county transportation department, Tom Washburn, and that road was not even built with shoulders that would allow for driving off the road. It is called a feeder connector road for neighborhoods. This would overburden, I think, this road. And not only that, but there's also some drainage problems on it, which we discussed too. In short, we would appreciate any new developments to adhere to the East Lake overlay density requirements of 2 acres per unit or a half unit per acre, however you want to phrase it, which would allow for a beautiful upscale private neighborhood. Thank you for your consideration of our residents. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Ambrosio. I live in Cypress Run. I am opposed to a large density of 2 homes per acre, and I'm looking at 1 home per acre, which I have no problem with. But I'm up here to enlighten the staff and enlighten Joe. When Cypress Run was built, I was a part of it. I also was a part of the Committee of 100. We helped to design the golf course, and I can tell you right now, the golf course floods. Water comes down from the east through the creek and soaks everything, and we cannot play on the golf course. And I'll tell you why this happens. The Committee of 100, in their infinite wisdom, because we were over here and not in Tampa, decided that the runoff from the Suncoast Parkway could move west and maybe catch the Anclote. And that's why there's so much water coming from the east to the west. And the golf course, every time the Anclote floods, we flood. And when we flood, North Highlands, East Lake Road floods right in front of, actually right in front of the entrance that's going to be for North Bay. That has got a shallow area, so the road's going to have to be lifted or it's going to be a washout. There is so many problems with the Suncoast Parkway's drainage system coming to the west to catch the Anclote that if we don't redirect it or have the Swift Mud take a look at it, it would be important to see how you can correct it. Not only for their subdivision, which I have no problem with as long as it meets the density, but also for ours, because we lose a lot of time on our own golf course. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity.
Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, thank you. My name is Linda Fox, and I also live in Cypress Run. And a lot of different things. During Hurricane Irma, 50 trees went down in the area. There's only going to be one entrance and exit out of North Lake Estates. What happens if a tree goes down during a storm and blocks the entrance and you can't get emergency vehicles in and out? I heard that there was supposed to be more than one entrance, but residents on George Street fought it. Where's the other proposed? I did read an article, a letter that was written by the fire chief asking for a Knox gate out onto Highlands. I don't see that on the plans either. What concerns me is that once it's annexed into the city, you said that the very least dense category, the least intense was this. How dense could they go once they became annexed into the city? That concerns us. Forced annexation, I know that's not on the agenda tonight, but is that a thing in the city of Tarpon Springs, forced annexation? Yes or no?
That's not what the application, any of the applications
Okay.
are here for today.
The narrow roadway on East Lake Drive, has anybody driven down East Lake Drive to see how narrow that is? Are you all familiar with that road? No. When you go over, there's a crest. The young kids like to go flying over that crest, and there are people walking because there are no sidewalks. So it is a very scary situation to be in. That road's going to have to be widened, and sidewalks definitely considered. And a traffic light at the end of when you come onto Tarpon Avenue, you can only turn one way, and then you have to make a U-turn. There's going to be a tremendous amount of backup traffic. The intersection at East Lake Road and Tarpon Avenue has a lot of backup. Our private resident gate has a very long delay. People currently tailgate through the neighborhood. When the gate closes on their car, they drive away. Guess who has to pay for the repairs of that gate? The residents do. And that's only going to get worse if you're talking 44 houses at 4 cars, that's 176 cars at 5 trips a day, that's 880 trips up and down East Lake Road. People are going to start cutting through the neighborhoods, they're going to start cheating the system, they're going to start jumping the median that they do already. Just please take all that into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Hello,
Sir,
I'm Steve Williams.
Did I swear you in?
No, sir. No, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, could you please raise your hand? Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Steve Williams. I live in Tarpon Springs. My uncle built most of Riverside. I don't live in their neighborhood, but I do drive down that road. And I can tell you all the, oh my God, it's so narrow and you can't drive down it with 2 people and there's people in the street. Yeah, it's not that bad. I'm just kind of tired of hearing the same thing over and over again. You know, I got a big truck. They said they've got a bunch of big trucks. So all this flooding thing really shouldn't be a big deal if they have big trucks. Now, if they have regular cars, it might be. Now, they talk about flooding on one side of Highland. That's true. and there's always been flooding on that part of Highland. But going down East Lake, no, there's never been that much flooding. And I drive down there every week. So at the end of East Lake,
He was quiet for everyone else.
it gets narrow. On the Tarpon side of it, the Tarpon Springs Road side of it, the Keystone side of it, no, not so much. So, oh, and the one lady who just got done sitting there saying, well, they're going to cut through our neighborhood. You're not allowed to go through the neighborhood. It's gated and they have a guard. So unless you have business in that neighborhood, you can't go in it in the first place. In order to get out the resident exit that goes out onto McMullen Booth, you actually have to have a key card. So you can't do that either. So, oh, tailgaters, you guys just spent a fortune to get that gate redone. So you didn't fix the problem with your tailgaters? That's something that you really ought to talk to your board about. Thank you.
No, I wasn't sworn in.
Okay, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
First of all, sir, where'd you go?
No, you're going to have to keep your comment. I need you to
I'll
direct
make
your
my comments
to
over
the
here.
board
That's fine.
only.
My name's Kim I
Name.
did that.
Name?
Kim Bernia. I live in Cypress Run. That gentleman is not familiar at all with the area. I'm sorry, he has no idea what he's talking about. I live there. I bought that house for a couple of reasons. Number one, the wildlife in that area will be destroyed when they come in and they do this. I understand that the development has to take place at some level, but the development needs to be at the 22 houses, not 44. That area cannot withstand that extra traffic. The animals in that area that everyone seems to be forgetting about will have nowhere left to go. They're not looking at the preservation whatsoever. They only have one exit out of there, and quite frankly, that road is dangerous. I myself drive a very large vehicle, which is a very large Jeep, and quite frankly, I can't drive down Highland. I'm in a Jeep that goes four-wheeling, and I can't drive down Highland 90% of the year because it is flooded right in front of his house. So I know for a fact that that road floods. That means one way in, one way out. That's only on East Lake Drive. And that road already has a problem with people walking up and down that road. And I have come close to hitting someone coming over the same hill she's referring to. And I know darn well you can't see people coming over that. If they are going to do this development, they need to widen the road, they need the sidewalks, and they need two exits out of that area, and they need to fix the flooding off of Highland so that there's other ways out. The gentleman that just spoke, he does not know what he's talking about, very clearly. And I think that that's enough. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak, if we could just limit it to things that haven't already been talked about? I think we've addressed traffic, stormwater flooding. Limit it to things we haven't already discussed. Right hand, if you could. Sorry. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
My name's Jim Parrish. My wife Linda and I have lived on the corner of East Lake Drive and Highland Avenue for 23 years. We own the farm, Tacony Farm and Ranch. And I wasn't going to speak tonight, but something really caught my attention when this gentleman spoke. Is I own all the way along North Highland Avenue. Now, the swale that goes along Highland Avenue is on my property. It's 100% my property. And the two concrete sluice pipes that he's talking about, yes, they're there. They've never worked properly. The county came along about 5 years ago and dredged that ditch out. They dug the whole ditch down below the level of the concrete swales. So we have two lakes that form down through there, and it doesn't drain. My wife and I want to develop the property down along Highland Avenue. We want to clear out under the power lines. We want to plant some kind of crops. We were talking, we've got over 250 pineapple plants that we want to plant down through there. I want to guarantee that this development is not going to increase the saturation level of that property to the point to where I can't use it. Something has to be done. These swales have to be dug out. Something has to be built down through there. So before any approval, I would ask that you delay your approval until somebody gives me a report guaranteeing that my property is not going to increase in water level. Because the water stops there, my property, when it hits Highland Avenue. I surely don't want to see it go up and over Highland Avenue. And I have seen the floods in the entrance of North Lake Estates. I have seen the water that's flooded. In fact, somebody brought my son home when he was 9 years old or 8 years old because he was swimming in the water at the bottom of that hill, wasn't he? He was. I mean, that's how the water is. And I've seen water flow in front of our neighbor's house from Cypress Run, right across their yard. There used to be a natural flow of water somewhere because there's also a kind of a flow that goes down through our property and out the back through our chicken coops because we get the flow down through there. Our driveway is sitting on the natural flow. So that's my concern, and I would just ask that you consider that something has to be looked at, an engineering survey or something to guarantee that if you approve this project that this is not going to flood my property. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against these applications? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Is it anything new other than what we haven't heard? Okay. If you could just approach the podium so I could swear you in as well, and then state your name and your address for the record. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
My concern is...
I'm sorry, could you state your name and address for the
Shelley
record?
Rogers, 2605 St. Andrews.
Thank you.
I live in Cypress Run. My concern is the attorney for the developer said that they were judging by the 25 to 100-year floodplain. Well, we are currently not in the 25 to 100-year flooding any longer. We are approaching into the 500-year flood. What is the proposal that they plan to make for that? We're not getting less water. We're getting more water. That's my only question. That needs to be considered. 25 to 100 years of water would be nothing because we are far surpassing that, and anyone who knows and lives on the ocean or on the water or on the Gulf or on a river knows that that is going to be a serious problem. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public portion of the meeting. If the staff, do you have a final presentation you would like to make?
I could, if you want to ask questions about some of the comments, or I could maybe address a couple of the major points brought up.
Does the board have any questions of staff based on the comments that have been made?
I have a few questions.
And keep in mind, the applicant will have a final presentation as well.
I have a question specifically in regards to the public services that were approved by the application. I was unaware that, like others, that septic systems was still part of the normal construction process. So is it true that this development would not have a pressurized or a sewer system and that all of the homes will be on septic systems?
That's correct. The current proposal is on-site sewage disposal. There's no wastewater service to the property.
And if I can take that just one step farther, I don't know if it's a question necessarily, but as I understand it, all the state agencies strongly are trying to move away from septic systems. In fact, as on the Board of Code Enforcement, we were pushing pretty hard for people to convert when it was possible. So is there, I guess, a penalty, or is there some type of worksheet that because they're going to do septic systems and they're discouraged, or is it just a normal course of business and there's lots of septics around them and that's what everybody has and that's what's to be expected?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with all of that would be the health department, all of their rules. I would say a good example would be Seabreeze development that we have now. It could be that wastewater will serve this area at some point and will be put, in the future. Septic tanks are allowed. Whether they are septic tanks forever or not is another question. Seabreeze is a good example that's on septic tanks and is being replaced by a sewer main. So that, you know, at the current time, septic tanks are permitted.
That answers that question. Thank you. Now, if I were to take that another step farther, would the owners, if they were to be, if we were to approve this and the annexation were to take place and the development were to be built, would the owners of that development have leverage over the city at that time to force a sewer main to be brought to them? Could there be a burden put on the city by taking this voluntary annexation for sewer specifically?
So I'm going to interrupt because that's not really part of the criteria on the voluntary annexation. I know it might be something that you know, but we can't deal on hypotheticals. It's based on the evidence that's been presented and the criteria for an annexation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. There was also a comment in regards to accessory buildings. Disclaimer, I'm in the construction business, and certain planned unit developments forbid accessory buildings, and there seemed to be some concern in the audience in regards. Would the owners, the prospective owners of the properties, be able to build accessory buildings as part of the development?
Yes, the applicant has requested the accessory, what they're calling mother-in-law apartments as part of these. They are included in the proposed development agreement. If you look at page 6 of the development agreement, which is an exhibit of the resolution, you'll see that they are proposed to be restricted to use by the owner. They can't be rented out, and they can't be separately addressed, which would prevent any future separate utilities or anything like that. That will be required when they come back. This project will come back for final plan development and subdivision. So all those details will have to be in the project when it comes back. But that is included in the development agreement.
I'd like to drill into that just one more step. Is the request in the providing for accessory structures or mother-in-law apartments, is that normal for planned unit developments of single-family residence? I mean, would that be typical and consistent, or would that be unique to this development and application?
The planning department is getting more and more requests and inquiries from people about these types of aging in place kind of extra units. As far as existing planned developments, I can't come up with one right now that requested and has accessory units. Most of the planned developments in the city, we really haven't had a recent one, so most of them are a few years old, but it's something that they can request, and this does have a development agreement associated with it, so it is something that they can request through that mechanism.
Thank you. I think I have a couple more questions.
Are any more questions for staff?
Yes. I've got to read my own handwriting. In regards to public services, if it were to be annexed as the part of City of Tarpon Springs, I did see a notation that actually the public services would be supplied by the county. So as I understand it, the City of Tarpon Springs would not be providing water or sewer. Where is that delineation? And again, we had a comment from the audience that when there was a call for police service, it's you know, that's not in our backyard or such. So what's in and what's out?
Potable water service is supplied by the county. Fire service is supplied by the county by Eastlake Tarpon Special Fire Control District. Wastewater is handled on site, so those are be private septic systems. The roads are the proposed roads that will need to be decided in the final plan development. Part of that is once the stormwater system and the stormwater handling for the road is worked out, that will be decided at that time, whether the city would take those roads or not. It's up to the city and the Public Works whether they would agree to take those roads. So that would be decided at that point. Solid waste would be served by the city. Law enforcement would be served by the city. Of course, the development will have access to and will be paying impact fees for all the other services for the city: recreation, public buildings, libraries, those types of things. So the only county services are potable water and fire, really, at this point.
And the roads that access it, the primary roads, which are North Highland and East Lake, are those county or those city roads?
Those are county roads.
So I can be clear in my mind, so we've got a parcel that's county that wants to be city, but it's served by county roads, septic system, county water, East Lake Fire District.
Correct.
So it's really quite a bit of an outlier out there, even though it's not so far. I guess that, and I know that that's not part. I just needed to know
Right.
what. 'Cause
I want to
doesn't-
make clear for everyone out there and for the record that that's not part of the annexation criteria. So it has to meet.
It's part of the development agreement, though, is it not?
How are services part of the development agreement?
Well, because they're been reviewed and delineated in the applications. They're not?
Well, so you have an annexation application, right, that has specific criteria. The development agreement is a legislative document. So there's no criteria for that. But I will say that that has to do with whether or not they're negotiating for their development. Whether or not those roads or county roads are not going to change unless, I mean, those are going to be county roads, county roads.
I guess I wanted to know all the facts about the annexation.
Right, but that doesn't have.
And forgive me, thank you, but that's not, this is just.
I'm just here to advise the board on the law. They ultimately make the decision. What I'm saying is that you're talking two different things. You're talking about the development agreement, and then you're talking about the annexation. They're two separate applications. So there are criteria for the annexation. What services you're saying, whether or not down the road, those roads are gonna be serviced or whatnot, the evidence that is presented as it applies to the annexation criteria, that is all you're to consider. As far as the development agreement, that is separate and apart from that, and that's a legislative document. You can consider whatever as far as the development agreement, but you have to consider whether or not it's jives with the land development code and whether it jives with the comprehensive plan. And they are forced to abide, if the development agreement is approved, of course, they are forced to abide by all city, county, and statewide laws and ordinances and regulations. So.
Okay.
But that's not going to change the distinction of those county roads being county roads. Nothing in the development agreement is going to take those roads from the county and make them city roads.
Of course not. I guess I'm just trying to dial in on, because the first 19.63, that's wrong, sorry. 1850 is the annexation. Without the annexation, everything else is moot.
Right, these are all kind of part and parcel. You can recommend approval or denial to the Board of Commissioners on each individual one, but without the package deal, I mean, the development doesn't go forward.
So these, I guess my questions were specifically in regards to the annexation, because as a longtime resident and one that's going to be here for a lot longer, I want to make sure that the annexation is in fact in the best interests of the residents of the city of Tarpon Springs.
But that's actually not part of your criteria.
It's not?
No, the annexation, they have, it's part of statute.
Okay.
If they voluntarily annex, you have to meet certain criteria. It's not an enclave.
Okay.
That the services, there's not a huge impact of services to the city or that they're otherwise paid for.
That's perfect. Repeat that.
I don't know what I just said. Read it back to me.
Number 2.
That the impact of property in question upon public facilities and the ability of the city to serve the property in question with public facilities upon annexation. The evidence that's been presented here today shows that there's not going to be an impact on the public facilities. It doesn't look like there's a lot that Tarpon Springs will be providing to this parcel of property.
And the county has provided letters stating that they can serve the property for potable water and fire.
Yeah, so as long as it meets those criteria, you are bound by the law to approve the annexation. Now, there may have been evidence that contradicts that. That's up to this board to make that determination. But you are bound by the criteria to determine whether or not it meets the criteria. You're bound by the evidence to determine whether it meets the criteria to annex in or not. It's not whether it's in the best interests of the city or not. It's whether it meets the criteria. I know that sounds convoluted,
It
but
doesn't,
that's
actually.
the law.
Thank you. I'll see if I have another question.
Does anyone else have any questions for staff?
Okay, my last question. So if annexation were to be approved, as well as the other application items, could it be possible that at some time in the future that the developer were to come back and change how many units were to be put on the property, or to change an access? Or is it as it is being submitted now?
The preliminary plan development that you're looking at this evening and the development agreement, both, well, the development agreement states outright, and the nature of the preliminary plan development process is that the layout they're presenting tonight cannot change substantially. So they've got to go with what they've got presented here tonight. If they want to change it, it would have to come back through the process.
Thank you. And that's all my questions. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Are there any other questions for the board for staff? Okay, would the applicant like to make their final presentation?
Very briefly, we heard a lot of passionate comments tonight about the existing conditions. There's an existing flooding, there's existing issues with traffic, there's more existing flooding and stormwater. And one of the things that is just the most basic part of development is that existing conditions can't be exacerbated by new development. They have to be mitigated by new development. And there's a variety of ways to do that. But most importantly is there really hasn't been any new development out in this area for several decades. And there hasn't been the opportunity for any developer to bear any of this burden. You heard Mr. Simoneau speak about the water flow in the stormwater and how this development would need to accommodate those things. And that will be the first time in decades that there's the opportunity in this area for a project to do that. And that's a positive for the community and for the area. With respect to some of the details about the utilities, and I've seen some of the code enforcement hearings with some of the other neighborhoods that the city's dealing with, but the annexation is voluntary. This is a property owner saying they would prefer to be in the city of Tarpon Springs than in the unincorporated. And the contiguity of other properties is there, giving them that opportunity. And the development agreement statute in the city code requires that the agreement recite, not commit, but recite where those services are coming from. And that's why you see those recitals in the development agreement. So just to be specific about the mother-in-law apartment conversation, I think it's important to note that this is not an increase in the density, which is very specifically why there's a restrictive covenant required, that in the event these lots are approved as is, they're close to 300 feet deep, sometimes more than 300 feet deep. And so as a builder, the developer is saying, instead of having a longer skinny house, perhaps somebody would want a pool house or have something else with a separate bedroom. And so they want to have that opportunity for familial relations, which is exactly what the agreement restricts it to be, not an increase in density. With respect to the septic, obviously that's permissible under state law and regulated by the Florida Administrative Code. And so just as any homeowner who would seek to have septic service, they would have to get permitted by individual lot and go through that process with the state. So with that, we understand that there are a number of people who have said that, you know, it's interesting. Everybody seems fine with 22 units, but not 44. But whether it's 22 or 44, the roads are their other comments are still the same. So that logic isn't quite congruent. Because what the bottom line is, in the city of Tarpon Springs, the residential very low is the least intense designation. The lot size is specific to the fact of trying to cluster these homes and have the least environmental and wetland impacts possible. And so the ability to annex this property and then develop it consistent with city code is exactly what the developer is requesting of this board to recommend approval. So, thank you.
Does the board have any final questions for the applicant?
No more questions?
No. Thank you very much. All right, any board discussion? And remember, you have 4 applications before you, so there will be 4 different motions, 4 different determinations that will need to be made, but we can have some general discussion at the outset. And it has to be public discussion. We are in the sunshine. This is a public board.
Yeah.
Please make sure you speak into the microphone.
I just have an issue with all the folks out here that have been discussing this issue about runoff. I'd like to know if there's going to be some kind of an additional study, how that's going to be taken care of, because
Well, you did hear the applicant, the evidence.
I heard both sides.
Right, but I'm just saying the
Gentleman
applicant.
that owns the little farm on the corner, he's got those culverts there, said they're all dug up. I mean, is there evidence that they're going to be corrected so it's not going to overburden everyone in the neighborhood?
Right, so I'm only repeating the evidence that has been presented, because that's all you're to consider for the applications. But the evidence that was presented was that there still has to be permitting through SwiftMud. There still has to be drainage plans and everything drawn. They still have to meet with the drainage code and everything here in the city of Tarpon Springs as well. So none of the drainage or site plans are before you, but with any new development, you have to have drainage internal to the property. It can't go on to outside properties, and that's regulated through SwiftMud along with other agencies. So they have to go through several different agencies before that will ever come back before this board, if any of these are recommended to the board and then passed by the Board of Commissioners later on. So that's not really, that's the only evidence that I have to present to you this evening, is that the drainage plan, or not me to present to you, but that's been presented this evening, is the drainage plan relative to the property is going to have to be developed, and it's going to have to be rigorous. What's currently the conditions on these properties is currently the conditions on these properties. It doesn't really have to do with the applications that are before you. Does that make sense?
I don't know, and I think I might politely disagree.
Well, I'm speaking from a legal context,
that-
so
and-
whatever
and
your
that- and
opinion
that's
is.
great.
And just remember, you have to take the evidence that's been presented tonight and apply it to the criteria on those that are quasi-judicial applications.
Since it's a discussion, we have the drainage plan right here.
Yeah, I
Okay.
see that.
Like in color copy and, okay. And this is just for discussion. The same issue that's on Highland Avenue to the west. There were 2 homes recently permitted and built, which is obviously was a ditch of some type, and that's why there's flooding there now. And they were approved, and they were built, and they probably have septic systems. And so the idea that it's mitigated and is all within, well, that is true, except that they don't study what's outside of it to a limited degree, because we have someone that just came to us and said, hey, that's not how it works. In addition, I'll just point out just an accessory fact.
When you say things like discussion, the discussion needs to be on the evidence that was presented and relative to the.
The evidence was presented is here, and I would say that as someone that drives that road, I'm not sure the evidence that's presented is right. That's not the point. I'm just saying, because I'm going to use another one, if I may, and this is discussion. We're allowed to discuss, right?
You're allowed to, and I'm going to
They
limit.
give us this
Mr.
fact book
Chairman,
right here. Yes, ma'am.
Because I'm here to make sure that we have a clear record, no matter what happens, right? So when we're talking about discussion, it needs to be germane to the applications before us here tonight.
Super. So I'm going to discuss this item right here, which is what they call the Environmental Considerations Report. Well, I happen to be friendly with this entire area, and I know for a fact that, as another person mentioned, is that the sandhill cranes and the wild turkeys that peruse this property aren't even mentioned on this report. I looked real careful for that. Now, maybe they didn't have to be. I just mean that there's stuff that's not there.
For civility purposes, if we could just hold all the applause, well, I appreciate that. They need to have a meaningful discussion one way or the other.
And my point is not that, it's just that not everything is always there. You know, they're all trying hard.
This is February of 2018. So this report's almost 2 years old, and they were there 4 days, and again in January.
Yeah.
So, and that's just ancillary to the fact that, hey, we've got some folks that say that there's a bunch of flooding outside of it. Now, and this fine gentleman probably did an incredible job and knows exactly what he's doing, and within the property, everything might be perfect. But heck, and that's why we're here chit-chatting about it. Okay. Is that still within the guidelines of discussion?
But I mean, your discussion just has to be germane to the applications.
Okay.
That's all I'm asking. When we start opining on things with our own personal knowledge, that's not necessarily germane to the application. That's the only thing, the only point I was
Well
trying to
said, you're right, okay. I didn't mean to interrupt, but.
Yeah, no.
If staff could be recognized, one thing that might help. We have 4 items before us. The preliminary plan development, and it is preliminary. That's why you don't see all the detail on the drainage and all those. If you want to suggest additional conditions than the 7 that we have to the Board of Commissioners, you can do that. Just a suggestion. I mean, all those details have to be met. The final plan development is really like the site plans that you guys see. All that detail is there. They are not at that stage yet. But, yeah, just a suggestion. So.
That seems like a very nice suggestion.
Yeah. I think so.
So as the discussion, just more discussion, that perhaps to address that concern in the proper place would be a recommendation for additional study or investigation of the outside conditions?
Yes.
I don't quite know how to do that, but perhaps you could help us do that.
Yeah, we'll help craft a motion when we get to that specific application where you want to add that condition.
Okay, super.
Okay, sounds good.
Is there any other discussion?
No.
I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, so let's take the first application. It's for the annexation. So Chairman, if you would call for a motion on the annexation.
I would like to call for a motion on the application 18-50 for the annexation.
And somebody does, in fact, have to make a motion. And Chairman, you can pass the gavel and make a motion if no one else is willing to do so.
I would be happy to pass the gavel and make a motion. Based on the facts and the data that's been presented to us, I'd like to motion that we approve application 18-50.
Is there a second on the motion?
So, Council, it doesn't appear that we have a second.
The motion fails for lack. Excuse me, I'm going to ask one more time for civility purposes. This is a public meeting of a public body. I know y'all are getting excited, but if we could hold all of the excitement until the end. Thank you. Then the motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion to be presented? And again, there does need to be a motion. You do need to present a recommendation one way or the other to the Board of Commissioners.
I'll make a motion.
Well, you have the gavel, so you need to
Oh,
pass the gavel
sorry.
back.
There you go, Justin. I make a motion to deny application 18-50, the annexation to the Tarpon Springs.
Is there a second?
Is that a motion?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Ms. Vigil? No. Or,
But yes,
Yes,
if you vote yes, it's positive on the motion.
sorry.
Ms. McCumber?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
No.
Mr. Staropoulos?
Yes.
The motion carries. Is there a motion for application 19-32 on the development agreement?
I motion to approve the application 19-32.
Is there a second? You can second. Well, no, you have the gavel. You can pass the gavel in a second.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Vihill?
Yes.
Ms. McCumber?
No.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes.
Mr. Staropoulos?
Yes.
Application 18-51, the future land use map amendment. Do I have a motion?
Council, can I interrupt for just a moment, please? There had been a short discussion in regards to making a recommendation in regards to further investigation, and I think that perhaps we've passed that moment. And I just wanted to check with.
No,
No.
you haven't, you have the
We're
opportunity.
not at that point yet in regards to,
You can do that under application 18-52.
okay, I guess I might have understood it to be part of the development agreement. It
And
was
there's
not.
no way to go back, that's already been
Thank you,
passed.
okay.
The
so
recommendation to the Board of Commissioners has already been passed.
Okay, so if we were to want to make that suggestion, it would be done at application 1852.
Correct.
Okay, and currently, we're looking for a motion on application 18-51.
Correct.
Do we have a motion?
It can be to approve or deny the recommendation to the board, but somebody needs to make a motion.
I'll make the motion deny application 18-51, the future land map amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Vihill?
Yes.
Ms. McCumber?
Yes.
Mr. Staropoulos?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
No. Application number 18-52. May
that-
I
yeah.
ask for a motion?
And this is where you would make the motion with conditions if you so choose.
Thank you so much. I would like to make a motion that we approve application 18-52 with a recommendation that further investigation is done in regards to the drainage outside or as it would have.
May I suggest,
Yes, ma'am.
for your consideration, some wording such as recommending consultation with Pinellas County on potential drainage issues adjacent to this property. They won't be able, I mean, the applicant will not be able to directly address off-property drainage.
Yeah,
They
can't
will
make
have
it
to
that way.
connect to East Lake Road, for example. So they're already gonna have to coordinate with Pinellas County. So you might recommend consultation with Pinellas County on adjacent drainage
I would
as
like-
part of the stormwater.
That verbiage there, please. Consultation with Pinellas County in regards to stormwater drainage. Is that sufficient?
Are there any other conditions you'd like to put on that motion?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so it's to approve with the stated conditions on the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Roll call. Go ahead.
Ms.
Oh,
Vihill?
well, you had the gavel.
Ms. Vihill?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Ms. McCumber?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes.
Mr. Staropoulos?
Yes.
Right, and now we move to item number 6 on the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Application 19-146. Is there anyone in the audience for 19-146? Do we have a staff presentation?
Yes, and the correct application number, do you want me to wait till it clears?
Oh, excuse me. For the record, it's application
Yeah, that's my
19-145.
mistake.
there was a
Can we just,
Scrivener.
because there's going to be ambient noise on the recording, we still have a public meeting going on, so we can either wait for them to clear or.
Is this a misprint?
It's complicated.
Dash 145? Yes.
And I'm always a bad guy.
The agenda is wrong. The staff report is
Well,
correct.
I noticed you wear a lot of black.
Hey, this is navy blue, and it's bows. It's festive.
She's like, it's a nice party.
Your demeanor is much better than Mr. Trask's was when he decided to get his point across.
I think.
No, I represent some difficult boards, so I'm used to being lambasted. It's okay.
I thought you were gonna stop the clapping on that earlier.
No, I mean, they have the right, they don't really have the right to clap, but.
I go to a lot of the commissioner meetings and they're always like, no clapping. Like, at the beginning, no clapping.
It's completely up to them. All right, okay, I think we probably.
You're good to go.
Yeah, can we like shush them out the door?
Everyone.
Speak loudly into the microphones to make sure the record catches you.
Are we ready?
We are ready.
I think we're ready. I seem to have lost mine in the pile shuffle, but please go ahead.
There you go.
Some other copies, okay. This is a request by the city, a proposed text amendment to the Land Development Code, addressing the section of our code that requires studies for hurricane shelter impacts for new development. And there are a couple of outdated items in that section of code that have come to light recently. The first is the code requires this study to be done for developments that have to evacuate for a Category 3 or higher storm. Well, as those of us who all live here know, the evacuation goes by the Pinellas County zones, not by the category of the storm that might be approaching. So that is outdated. It's proposed to be changed to Pinellas County Evacuation Zone A, B, or C. And if you're in those areas, you would be required to do this shelter study. Now, I did confirm with Pinellas County that that does correspond pretty closely with what the Category 3 would have covered. And apparently, I did check with previous staff, and that's how they were interpreting it. But the change really needs to be made to go to those evacuation zones. And then the other item that's outdated is the use of the population percentage that would use local shelters. There's a 25% number in there. Rather than trying to research and change that number, staff is leaving that and suggesting that we add the provision for the applicant to be able to document via studies that are accepted, generally accepted, what the population level would be that would use local shelters and what the persons per household would be that are evacuating. The regional planning councils have been doing these evacuation studies periodically over the years, so they are doing those on a regular basis, and there is always new data coming out based on that. So that's the requested change to that section. And staff is recommending approval of this change.
Does anyone have any questions of staff regarding? No one left in the audience.
No members of the public.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I motion to approve 19
I think it's 145.
145.
I'll second it.
Roll call?
Ms. Feehill?
Yes.
Ms. McCumber?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Mr. Vesey?
Yes. Additional comments?
No, now we're on staff. Staff have comments?
No comments tonight.
No comments, Louis?
No comments.
Board comments.
Any board comments? Any public comments? Okay, then, I'm Going to adjourn the meeting at 9:08.
Yeah. Wait, that was much shorter than I anticipated. Good job.
Does anyone have a